It was a Saturday evening and the sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a twilight that made deciding whether to turn on the headlights difficult. Jack Thompson didn't have to worry about that as he was pulling into his garage on a quiet street in Greenville. Shortly after, a tall, dark-haired man stepped out of a side door carrying a duffel bag, briefcase, and laptop with practiced ease. Without calling out to his wife, Emily, knowing she wasn't home, he entered the house. He went straight to the living room, placing his briefcase and laptop on the couch and leaving his garment bag by the stairs. After hanging his coat in the closet by the front door, he removed his jacket and tie, unbuttoning the top buttons of his shirt. Jack had just returned from a regional managers meeting at XYZ Industries. Although he wasn't a manager, as the lead systems analyst, his supervisor VDJ, who was good at organizing staff but clueless about computer systems, VDJ needed him at the meeting in Chicago. Jack had told Emily he'd be back on Monday, explaining that the meeting would be followed by weekend seminars. He had his reasons for not wanting to return early, and knew Emily would have questioned why he didn't bring comfortable clothes for the trip. Now home, he showered and changed into jeans and a polo shirt. After a quick meal of leftovers and a bottle of beer, he settled in the living room with the local newspaper, looking like a husband relaxing after a trip. In reality, he was buying time, dealing with a personal crisis. He had moved past denial but was still wrestling with anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. After midnight, he tidied up the kitchen, realizing it was just a way to delay facing his problems. Finally, he put on a light jacket and headed for the side door. Remembering something, he returned to the living room, sent an email from his laptop, and then left the house. 5 minutes later, he drove away, the garage door closing behind him. At 7:37 a.m., a Greenville emergency operator answered a call. "Emergency services, how can I assist you?" asked a young-sounding female voice. "I need the police. I think something bad has happened," replied a shaky voice. "Where are you calling from, ma'am?" the operator inquired. "I'm at a payphone on Park Drive near Lincoln Park," the caller answered. The operator, noting the poor connection, asked, "Can you tell me what happened? Were you hurt or robbed?" The young woman hesitated. "No, it wasn't me. I'm okay. I was jogging through the park on the road to the picnic areas and saw a car parked with the doors open, lights on, and a lot of blood." The emergency operator, now very concerned, asked, "Is anyone injured? Should we send an ambulance?" "No, there was no one there, just an empty car and blood," she said quickly. "I didn't stay to look around. I got scared someone might come after me, so I ran to this payphone." "You did the right thing. A patrol car is on the way and should be there in less than 10 minutes. Please wait for the officers so you can show them the exact location," the operator assured. Frightened, the caller replied, "No, I can't wait. What if they come after me? I'm going home," and hung up. The emergency operator stared at the screen as the call ended. "Damn it, I hope I didn't just send officers away from something more urgent." Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Detective John Parker arrived at the Thompson residence. As he got out of his car, a blonde woman pulled into the driveway. He quickly approached her. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Mrs. Thompson." She turned, pulling a suitcase from the car, and replied, "I'm Emily Thompson. Do I know you?" "No, ma'am. I'm Detective John Parker from the Greenville Police. We're trying to locate your husband, Jack Thompson. His car was found abandoned in Lincoln Park this morning," he said, showing his badge and ID. Emily looked puzzled but then said, "Jack is in Chicago. He always leaves his car at the airport. You must have made a mistake." Detective Parker insisted, "We're sure it's his car. Both the license plate and VIN match his registration." Confused, she walked toward the side door. "If it's his car, it must have been stolen from the airport. I don't know what else to tell you." Parker persisted. "When did you last speak to your husband? Can you call him now to confirm he's in Chicago? Does he have a cell phone you can reach?" Emily stopped, set down her bag, and rummaged through her purse for her phone. "He called me yesterday morning from Chicago. I'll try calling him now." She dialed his number, but the phone rang in the detective's pocket. He answered, "Hello." Emily, shocked, asked, "How did you get Jack's cell phone?" Parker replied, "I can't give it to you. It's evidence in a potential major crime. It was found in your husband's car." Emily, now alarmed, asked, "Major crime? What do you mean?" Your husband's car was found with the doors open and a bullet hole. We need to find him to rule him out as a victim or suspect. Can you call his hotel in Chicago?" Emily picked up her briefcase and said, "Sure, the hotel's number is in my address book. He always stays at the same Holiday Inn." "Let's sort this out inside," Detective Parker suggested. In the kitchen, Emily quickly located the hotel's number and made the call. After hanging up, she turned to the detective, looking confused. "Jack's briefcase and laptop are in the living room. I don't understand." Detective Parker, appearing thoughtful, pulled out his phone. "Hey Dave, it's John. I need a search warrant for the Thompson house. We need to determine if Mr. Thompson is a victim or a suspect. Get it here ASAP." "I'll be waiting," he instructed before hanging up. He then sat down across from Emily. "A search warrant? You can search all you want, just ask." "I want you to find my husband," Emily insisted. "I need to follow protocol," Detective Parker explained. "If your husband is involved in anything illegal, any evidence found without a warrant can't be used in court." Emily's temper flared. "Illegal? Jack isn't involved in anything illegal. He works with computers," Parker asked calmly. "Then why did he come back to town without telling you?" Emily turned pale and whispered, "Oh no, he can't be." Panicking, she said, "I have no idea why he came home early. All I know is he's not involved in anything illegal. He could be hurt somewhere. You have to find him." Parker, in a gentler tone, reassured her. "We don't know anything for sure yet, Mrs. Thompson. I need to do things right. All of our officers are looking for your husband. Why don't you make some coffee while we wait for the warrant?" His sympathetic tone helped calm Emily, and she started making coffee. However, she tensed up again when he asked, "While we have coffee, could you tell me how you spent the last 48 hours? We need statements from everyone involved." Nesbitt waited a few minutes before asking for a preliminary statement. They sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee while he described the condition of Jack's car, including the bullet hole and blood. He explained that the blood suggested a second bullet had been fired, and that the body, found lying on firewood next to the car, was being examined. The car had been towed for further inspection, and the medical examiner and forensic scientist were still working on the scene. Detective David Clean, Parker's partner, arrived with the search warrant and 2 forensic technicians. They began a thorough search of the Thompson home, garage, and car. Parker arranged with Emily to collect Jack's razor and toothbrush for DNA comparison. Emily was so distressed that Parker asked her to stay on the couch while they finished the search. After an hour, they decided to take only Jack's briefcase, laptop, and DNA samples. The laptop was password protected. "Mrs. Thompson, do you know your husband's laptop password?" Parker asked. Emily, hopeful to help, replied, "It used to be his first and last name and his birth year. Try Jack Thompson 1975. It should work." None of the variations worked. Parker reassured her, "Our technicians will find a way around it." The items were stored in the forensic van. Parker then sat with Emily to get her statement. "So, Mrs. Thompson, I need some basic information about your whereabouts this weekend. Let's start with Saturday morning." Emily took a deep breath. "Saturday morning I did chores around the house. Jack called from Chicago around 1 o'clock or 1:30, apologizing for not being home. I went shopping until 4:30, then came home. After dinner, around 7:30, I went to a friend's house and stayed the night. This morning I got up late, took my time, and got home around 2 o'clock. As she explained, she grew more tense, staring at the floor and clenching her fists. Parker finished writing, closed his notebook, and said, "We might need more details later, Mrs. Thompson. This is enough for now, but be ready to provide more if needed." He pocketed his notepad and pen, then stood up to join the others searching the garage and car. Before leaving, he asked, "Do you have any recent full-length photos of your husband? A good headshot would also help. We only have his driver's license photo." He walked to the fireplace, glancing at wedding photos. Emily quickly fetched a photo album. "Here are some recent photos, Detective. Take your pick." They sat together, and Parker chose a group photo and a headshot of Jack. "These will be perfect," he said. Emily handed him the photos, and he asked, "Is the man in the photo a relative? If we need a DNA sample, a family member could help if we can't use the razor or toothbrush." Emily replied, "No, that's Blake Moore, Jack's best friend since elementary school. Jack has no nearby relatives." Parker thanked her and joined the others in the garage. Emily, looking on the verge of tears, stayed at the kitchen table. Parker felt sympathy for her. Her husband was missing and possibly involved in a serious incident. The fact that she didn't know he was in town added to the mystery. The detectives and forensic experts finished searching the garage and car. They found bloodstains on the gas and brake pedals of Emily's car, prompting them to tow it for further inspection. Once the detectives finished packing up, they discussed the case. Standing by the side door, Nesbitt said to his partner, "What do you think of Mrs. Thompson? I've got my doubts, especially with the blood in her car." His partner replied, "She came off like a worried wife, but ITVDJTM's too early to tell for sure. We shouldn't jump to conclusions just yet." Nesbitt decided, "Let's see how she reacts when we tell her about the blood and towing her car." They knocked and re-entered the kitchen, catching Emily off guard as she was on her cell phone. She quickly ended the call. "You're back, I thought you were done," she said. Nesbitt spoke up. "We found blood smears on the pedals of your car. We're towing it for a thorough inspection. I hope you don't mind." Emily looked shocked. "Blood in my car? I didn't see any blood." Nesbitt responded, "We need to know how it got there. If it's connected to the park incident, we'll dig for answers. Also, we'll need the shoes you wore today." "I haven't been to the park in weeks. I don't understand how there could be blood in my car," she replied, handing over her shoes before collapsing into a chair and covering her face, sobbing. Realizing they needed more information, the detective said goodbye, leaving Emily slumped on the kitchen chair. "What do you think, Dave? Is she a worried wife or a good actress? Did you notice she was on the phone and hung up quickly?" Nesbitt asked. David Klein shook his head. "I don't know, Pete. She seems genuine, but if the blood in her car is her husband TM's, she might be involved. We should talk to their friends and neighbors. Maybe someone knows something. She was likely talking to her best friend." "Yeah, digging around might help. I want to know why he came back early. That could be the key," Nesbitt replied, bagging the shoes as evidence. Since they had arrived separately, they drove back to the station alone, each trying to make sense of the clues. They spent the rest of their shift on reports. The next morning, Peter and Dave arrived early, eager to dive into the case. They were greeted by the forensic and medical examiner reports. It took an hour to read through them. Peter noted, "The reports point in the same direction, but we shouldn't rush. Let VJ Tam see what else we can find from the computer. Meanwhile, we should talk to his lawyer and colleagues." David agreed, and they visited Jack's lawyer, Robert Graham, who quickly gave them a few minutes of his time. "I can VJTM discuss my client VJTM's legal situation. What do you need?" he asked. Detective Nesbitt said, "We need confirmation of these emails sent to you from Jack Thompson's computer. We want to ensure they're not just drafts." He handed over 4 pages. The lawyer confirmed, "These are originals. I can confirm receipt." The detectives thanked him and headed to their car, exchanging smiles on their way to ABC Industries. Peter said, "As you mentioned, the spouse is usually involved, but we have more work to do at Jack VDTM's workplace." They were ushered into his supervisor's office. Detective Klein took the lead. "We're investigating the discovery of Jack Thompson's car in George Washington Park. You might have read about it. We have some questions." Mark B. assured them of his cooperation. "Jack is a valuable employee. What do you need to know?" First, was Jack supposed to stay in Chicago until Friday night? He reportedly had seminars on Saturday and Sunday. "We need to confirm his schedule," Detective Klein inquired. Jack Boss quickly responded, "Jack didn't TM to have any events scheduled for the weekend. I expected him back Friday night." Detective Klein noted this and continued, "Have you noticed anything unusual about Jack lately? Anything on his mind?" The boss thought for a moment, then replied, "Jack seemed to have a lot on his mind recently. I asked if he was having any problems, but he said everything was fine. TM's been brooding a lot. I assumed he was just working hard." The detectives thanked him and returned to their car, sensing they were making progress. By late morning, they were back at the office and received preliminary DNA results and a forensic report, which included a strange box with wires. With more pieces of the puzzle in place, they reviewed their notes and information in an interrogation room, confident they had a better understanding. They decided to visit Emily Thompson again, arriving at the Thompson house around 3 p.m. They didn't call ahead to catch her off guard. Emily seemed startled when she saw them. "Detectives, have you found my husband? I call the sergeant every 2 hours and he has nothing to report," she said. Detective Nesbitt replied, "No, but we have made some progress. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Emily, looking embarrassed, said, "Of course, come in. I'll do my best to help." In the living room, the detective sat down across from her. Detective Nesbitt leaned forward, his voice steady. "Lisa, are you related to Blake Moore?" Lisa's voice trembled as she answered, "No, absolutely not. Why would you think that?" Standing up, Detective Klein added, "We need you to come to the station to make an official statement." Lisa's eyes widened in panic. "I'm under arrest? Why do I have to go to the police station?" "You're not under arrest," Nesbitt explained. "But we need a formal statement. You have the right to have a lawyer present if you wish." Lisa shook her head, her voice determined. "I don't need a lawyer. I'm going to the police station. I just want help finding Jack." Lisa followed the detectives to their car. At the police station, they led her to a small, dimly lit interrogation room, furnished in a way that made her nervous. "We'll be right back to start. Are you sure you don't want a lawyer?" Detective Nesbitt gave her one last chance to change her mind. "No, I'm fine," she said with tears in her eyes. The detectives left the room, making sure the cameras were recording. Detective Klein turned to his partner. "I want everything to be recorded. Maybe we'll finally solve this case." Peter Nesbitt, holding a folder of documents, suggested, "Let's give her some time to think. A coffee break sounds good." The three men spent about 20 minutes in a nearby coffee shop, reviewing their notes and planning their next steps. Meanwhile, across town, a Stop Crime volunteer answered the phone. "Good morning, this is Stop Crime. We are offering up to $1,000 for information about unsolved crimes. This call is being recorded." After a short silence, the voice of an elderly man was heard. "Can I get money if I help the police?" "It depends on your information and its usefulness. Do you have information about a crime?" There was a long pause before the caller continued. "Will I get the money right away? How do I know that the police won't cheat me?" "The reward is not from the police. They will not cheat you. Give me your details and I will give you a code number. You can call me in a few days and find out if your tip helped." The man replied in frustration, "I need money now. I need juice. If you need food, I can refer you to a shelter. Not food. Juice, the kind that costs $5 a bottle." The volunteer replied, smiling, "If you give us good information, we can buy a lot of juice." "Okay, fine. I saw someone throw a rifle and 2 shovels into the river under the 3rd Street Bridge. It was Sunday morning." The volunteer asked, "Was it on the east side of the bridge? Did he throw them into the water?" "Yes, he just threw them off the pier. I can describe him. He was a big guy with blonde hair. His car was dark blue. The license plate started with SS, but I don't remember the rest." The volunteer wrote down the details and said, "I have all the information I need. Your number is 127. Call back in a few days and we will let you know if your information helped the police." The volunteer passed the information to the police liaison officer. An hour later, the diver found the weapon. The weapon, which matched a recent crime scene in George Washington Park, was taken to a crime lab. A report was sent to the detectives, and a technician seized the shovels from the property clerk. As the detectives were leaving the coffee shop, they were met by the clerk, who brought ballistics and stop crime reports. "Detectives, we have the weapon that was used in the George Washington Park shooting. This report may lead you to the suspect." The clerk handed over the documents. Klein and Nesbitt reviewed the reports and checked the vehicle records on the computer. "Pete, let's split up the task. I'll question Lisa in the interrogation room, and you'll arrange for a uniformed officer to bring Blake Moore in." "Good idea, Dave. We're putting this case together." Detective Klein gathered the reports and headed for the interrogation room. Meanwhile, Nesbitt had arranged for a uniformed officer to visit Blake Moore's home. Lisa was sitting in the interrogation room, seemingly calm. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Mrs. Thompson. This room is monitored and recorded," Detective Klein said. She replied, "I don't mind, I have nothing to hide." "Okay, let's get started. Did you have an affair with Blake Moore, yes or no?" Emily's shoulders slumped and she looked away. "Yes," she whispered. Klein showed the documents from Jack's laptop. "We have proof of your affair. Jack knew. He sent them to his lawyer, planning a divorce based on infidelity. This map shows your visits to the Moore house." Emily looked stunned. "How did Jack know?" Klein held up a small device. "He installed this tracker in your car to track your location." She stared at the device, tears welling up in her eyes. "Jack has known about this for weeks and he wanted a divorce." She began to cry. Klein said, "Jack has documented your meetings with Blake. The latest tracker record shows that you were at his house the night he disappeared. He even wrote to his lawyer that he planned to meet with you and was afraid of the possible consequences," Klein said. "But Jack never made it to Blake's house," Emily stammered. "I spent the night there," Klein continued. "Preliminary DNA results show that the blood in the park is his. We found a weapon linked to Blake. The question is, how long are you going to protect him?" Emily's voice trembled as she persisted. "Blake didn't hurt Jack. We were together all night." Klein leaned in. "We also found your husband's blood in your car and on your shoes. My partner is taking Blake in for questioning right now. Whoever cooperates first will get the best deal." Emily remained silent, visibly agitated, as Klein handed her the blood test reports. She barely glanced at them, sobbing, "Jack can't be dead. I love him. I need him." "Blake will tell you the same thing," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "If Jack got hurt, it wasn't because of us. We had nothing to do with it." Detective Klein gave her a few minutes to compose herself. When she calmed down, he said, "There is no doubt that your husband is dead. The medical examiner has concluded that there is a 95% chance of that, given the blood loss and the lack of treatment at any facility in the area." He handed her the report and photos from the crime scene. Seeing the bloody images, Emily burst into tears again. "I'm going to leave you for a few minutes to think. Denying responsibility won't help," Klein said before leaving the room. He put the reports on his desk, shook his head as he passed his commander, and then headed to the break room for a coffee while his commander watched Emily through the camera in the interrogation room. Meanwhile, Detective Nesbitt arrived at Blake Moore's house, where he met a patrol car. He was almost surprised when Blake quickly opened the door. "Yes, officers. How can I help you?" Blake asked when he saw the police officers. "I'm Detective Nesbitt. I'm here about the disappearance of Jack Thompson. We need you to come to the station for questioning. Mrs. Thompson is there now, and we have questions that require your participation," Nesbitt explained. "Am I under arrest? I know Jack missing, but I don't know how I can help," Blake said, confused. "We have some questions that you might be able to help answer. Please come with us." "You are not under arrest," Nesbitt assured him. Blake, too stunned to resist, joined them in the unmarked car. He sat in the back seat following department protocol. On the way to the station, Nesbitt asked, "How well do you know Mrs. Emily?" "To me, she's just Jack's wife. Why do you ask?" Blake replied. "Just curious, what do you do, Mr. Moore?" Nesbitt asked. "I run a landscaping company, Moore's Landscaping. We do a lot of commercial work, even for the city," Blake replied, relaxing a bit. At the police station, Blake was placed in an interrogation room next to Emily's room. Detective Nesbitt gathered Klein's files and began questioning Blake. At first, Blake denied having an affair, but when confronted with evidence from emails and video surveillance, he confessed. He admitted that their affair lasted almost 4 months, but insisted that neither of them had harmed Jack and that they had not left the house the night Jack disappeared. When Nesbitt pressed him, Blake offered a new theory. "If Jack found out about us, he could have gotten angry or even hired someone to make it look like we were involved. He and I have a history together." Nesbitt objected. "We have the Gwintivka that was fired and a witness who described you and your car, including most of the license plate. Don't try to claim that Jack set you up." Blake was furious. "You don't know Jack. We've been best friends since elementary school, but I learned not to mess with his girlfriends and wife. In high school, I dated one of his girlfriends behind his back. When he found out, he scared me, even though I was bigger and stronger. He warned me that he would eliminate me if I did it again." A little amused, the detective replied, "So you were afraid of him but still had an affair with his wife?" Blake, calming down, replied, "I couldn't resist her. It had been building up for years, and a few months ago I took the plunge. We've been seeing each other ever since. I can't believe he found out. We were so careful." Nesbitt sifted through the reports. "Affairs often lead to murder. I think you and Lisa planned this. You can either confess or get the maximum penalty. The choice is yours." Blake insisted. "We had nothing to do with it. If Jack had found out, he might have done something drastic. He might have set us up." Nesbitt said, "We have probable cause to search your home, car, and office. Confess now to get less punishment." "I don't know anything about it," Blake insisted. The detective gathered his papers and remarked, "When criminals conspire, they often turn on each other. You won't be leaving anytime soon." Outside the interrogation room, Detective Nesbitt found his partner with another report. "The shovels found in the river are from Moore's Landscaping. They think they can outsmart us," Nesbitt said, shaking his head. With this additional evidence, the detectives presented their findings to the district attorney. Despite the absence of a body, the evidence was compelling enough to proceed with charges. Half an hour later, Emily Thompson and Blake Moore were formally charged with the homicide of Jack Thompson. As their Miranda rights were read, both protested their innocence. Following their arraignment, Emily and Blake were fingerprinted and photographed, their expressions solemn. As they were led back to their cells, they spoke for the first time since being charged. "What are we going to do, Blake? They can't possibly believe we had anything to do with Jack's disappearance, can they?" Emily asked, still sniffling. "We need separate lawyers, or maybe share one to save on costs, since we're accused of the same crime." "But this is all wrong. I think Jack set us up," Blake said, frustrated. "You can't believe that, can you? Why would Jack go to such lengths?" Emily asked, shocked. "I don't think you knew Jack as well as you thought. I'm amazed he didn't do something drastic when he found out about us." "If I'd known he'd find out, I wouldn't have touched you," Blake replied, shaking his head. Blake recounted a past incident when he secretly dated one of Jack's girlfriends. Standing by the cell bars, separated by a concrete wall, they could easily talk. "I don't believe Jack would do this. I don't even know how he found out. We were always careful and only met when he was out of town," Emily said thoughtfully. "I regret betraying him. Even if he's not dead, I want a divorce," she added, her voice trailing off with emotion. Blake listened to her sobs and said, "Emily, stop it. You knew the risks when you came to my house. You were aware of the consequences." She quieted down and said softly, "You're right. I just hope he forgives me." After a pause, Emily suggested, "I could call Robert Graham, our attorney. Maybe he can represent both of us and split the costs." They agreed, and Emily got an officer's attention to make a call. However, Robert Graham declined due to his involvement in Jack's divorce proceedings, recommending his colleague Basil Smith instead. Emily agreed, and Smith was on his way. Blake was pleased to hear this and thanked Emily. They waited in their cells until Basil Smith, a seasoned lawyer, arrived. The introductions were brief as Smith reviewed the charges. "So you're both charged with Jack Thompson homicide. What did the officers tell you?" Smith asked. "Mrs. Emily, you first, VDJ, just the main points." Emily recounted her story, ending in tears. "I had nothing to do with it. I love Jack. I couldn't hurt him." Smith then turned to Blake. "Your turn, briefly." Blake summarized his experience, asserting, "We had nothing to do with Jack's disappearance. I think Jack orchestrated this to frame us." Sensing the urgency, Smith said, "We need to focus on getting you both out of here. Bail will likely be set at $100,000 each. Will that be a problem?" Emily, shocked, asked, "Do I need $100,000 for bail?" "No, just 10% or $10,000 cash for the bail bond," Smith reassured her. They agreed they could manage bail and were eager to be released. Smith informed them, "You'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. Bail will be set then, and you'll make arrangements to get out. Prepare to spend the night here." Both clients reacted badly to the lawyer's statement, but he explained that he couldn't do more until charges were filed. Once they were out, he would talk to the district attorney to unseal the evidence and better understand their case. They were taken back to their cells, where neither slept well, given greasy takeout food, a single blanket, and loud cellmates. The next morning at 10 o'clock, they met with their attorney before court. Despite their disheveled appearance, they entered their pleas of not guilty, and bail was set at $100,000 each. Blake, owning a home and business, quickly negotiated a $10,000 bond and was released by early afternoon. Emily was less fortunate. Without sole ownership of her home and finding her savings account empty, she had to call her parents for help. After much persuasion, they agreed to provide the $10,000. However, the delay meant she spent another night in jail, this time with 2 tipsy cellmates. The next day, after the financial matters were resolved, Emily was released. She went home, showered, and ignored incoming calls. The next month passed quickly. Emily learned that Jack had withdrawn the money from their account to protect his share before their divorce. She received the divorce papers without knowing what he did with the cash. Emily and Blake met with Basil Smith again to strategize. Smith received copies of the evidence multiple times and planned to meet with the district attorney to get the charges dismissed, arguing the difficulty of obtaining a conviction without a body or witness. He suggested hiring a private investigator to explore if Jack had orchestrated his own disappearance. Blake agreed, but Emily believed Jack was the victim of a botched carjacking. Over the next few weeks, the investigator found nothing. He tried to locate the tipster who reported the discarded rifle and shovels, but no one recognized the voice from the call, and the tipster never followed up, adding to the mystery. Meanwhile, tensions between Emily and Blake grew after his release. Blake suggested they continue their affair, but Emily refused, blaming him for her situation. "I want nothing to do with you except for our court case," she often said, crying. Blake's response was cold. "Suit yourself, Emily, you're not the only woman in town." They only spoke in the company of their lawyer, keeping their distance otherwise. Their affair had turned icy cold. A month after their release, Basil Smith arranged a meeting with District Attorney Jeff Bagden. Emily and Blake hoped the charges would be dropped. They had been inundated with questions about their relationship and screened calls using caller ID and answering machines, eager to clear their names and move on. Jeff Bagden, surprisingly young and stylish, began, "I just received final reports from the medical examiner and police. Based on the evidence, I'm offering a reduced sentence of 8 to 12 years for a guilty plea to second-degree homicide." Emily and Blake were shocked, loudly proclaiming their innocence. Their attorney, trying to calm them, asked how Bagden justified the offer. Bagden explained, "We have new evidence. DNA from blood on your car's license plate and trunk gasket matches Jack Thompson. Additionally, black polyethylene found under Jack car matches material from your landscaping business." Emily angrily accused Blake, "What have you done?" Blake exploded, "You know I had nothing to do with it. You were with me when it happened." Basil Smith intervened, calming them both. He addressed Bagden, "Excuse my clients, we hoped the charges would be dropped, and your statement caught them off guard." Bagden, amused, replied, "I understand, but we have enough evidence to go to trial." The medical examiner's report confirms the victim lost too much blood to survive. The crime scene suggests the body was dragged and loaded into a car. The prosecution is confident. Bagden handed over the reports and left. Emily and Blake hurriedly talked to Smith, who told them to be quiet. He said, "I know you're shocked. Don't fight each other. We need to figure out a defense. Do you want to reject the plea deal?" Both refused the deal, convinced they wouldn't be convicted. Smith agreed to prepare for trial. After they left, Smith reviewed the reports, questioning whether his clients were truthful. Despite his doubts, he was committed to defending them. Months later, the trial began. Judge Robert Cox took his seat at 10 a.m. on Monday. Basil Smith sat between Emily and Blake to manage their tension. He had considered suggesting separate lawyers, but they couldn't afford it. Blake's business was struggling, and Emily had quit her job due to the stress of the trial and difficulties with her missing husband's friends. District Attorney Jeff Bagden began his opening statement directly. "Members of the jury, we do not have Jack Thompson's body, but we intend to prove he is dead, and that the defendants are guilty of his homicide." He revealed that the defendants had an affair, which Jack Thompson discovered, leading him to file for divorce. Although it was unclear how or when Jack found out, traces on his computer showed he knew when and where they met. Emails documented his tracking efforts, financial preparations for divorce, and his intention to confront them. We cannot pinpoint when they met, but we know the results. Evidence suggests they met at Mr. Moore's residence, where Mr. Thompson was incapacitated, placed in the passenger seat, and driven to George Washington Park. There he was shot in the upper chest while likely unconscious. He was dragged from the car, thrown to the ground, and shot again, this time striking his carotid artery. Graphic photos will show his final moments. At this point, Emily Thompson lost her composure, requiring Judge Cox's intervention to restore order. Bagdon continued. After the second shot, Mr. Thompson was wrapped in plastic, dragged from the site, and loaded into Mr. Moore's trunk. He was driven to an unknown location and buried. The homicide weapon and shovels were dumped in the river, but a concerned citizen tipped us off, leading to their discovery. Emily and Blake, both pale and trembling, exchanged glances. They knew the situation was dire. Smith, sensing the need for a strategic pivot, requested a recess to confer with his clients. During the recess, Smith spoke urgently to Emily and Blake. "The evidence is damning. We need a solid strategy, or you both could face life sentences. Is there anything you haven't told me?" Blake, his voice breaking, confessed. "There was a confrontation. Jack showed up that night. He was furious and things got out of hand. I tried to calm him down, but he attacked me. Emily tried to intervene, and in the struggle he hit his head. He wasn't moving, and we panicked. We thought he was dead, so we did what we did." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't mean to kill him, it was an accident. But when we saw the blood, we thought it was over for us." Smith took a deep breath. "This changes everything. We can argue for manslaughter, not premeditated murder. It was a tragic accident, not a calculated crime." Back in the courtroom, Smith presented the new information, painting a picture of a tragic accident fueled by fear and panic. He argued that while their actions afterward were reprehensible, the initial incident was not premeditated murder. The jury deliberated for several days. Finally, they returned with a verdict: guilty of manslaughter. Emily and Blake were sentenced to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6 years for good behavior. As they were led away, Emily whispered to Blake, "We'll get through this, one day at a time." Blake squeezed her hand. "Together, we'll make it through." Years later, after serving their time, Emily and Blake were released. They had lost everything but found a strange sense of closure and the opportunity to start anew. They parted ways, each determined to rebuild their lives and never repeat the mistakes of the past.